Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. I am Siti Nurhana binti Muhammad Rapandi, student ID 20206170x6. For this group project, the study has been carried out to analyze a topic of statistics and probability that we have collected from the past year question. And this fact finding is to fulfill the requirement of the subject statistics and probability syllabus. So as stated by WHO, World Health Organization, there are 17.9 billion leading of death globally each year due to the increase of blood pressure that may contribute to the cardiovascular disease. This is often due to the unhealthy lifestyle, such as they do not getting enough nutrient, dietary fibers, as well as regular physical activities. Okay, nutritionist researcher from Delhi, Monisha Ashokan, says that a high blood pressure is a high amount of blood pumped by the heart. Okay, so the study is to investigate the relationship between the number of grams of protein eaten per day and the reading of diastolic blood pressure. According to the National Library of Medicine, an increased intake of protein, particularly plant protein, may lower blood pressure and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. So one can accomplish all the healthy lifestyle, could have a better lifespan throughout their daily basis. For the objective of the study is to investigate the relationship between the number of grams of protein eaten per day and the reading of diastolic blood pressure. And next is to obtain the type of graph that are suitable for the data between the number of grams of protein eaten per day and the reading of diastolic blood pressure. And next is to find the measurement of tendency and measurement of dispersion. And next is to determine the correlation and regression of the data. Okay, significance of study of this topic is really important, whereas to know food plays as important vital role in the maintenance of good health and both prevention and cure disease, because the right kind of food is the most important single factor promotion to the good health, and the wrong kind of food is the most important single factor promotion to the disease. So nutrition are required for build up and maintenance of healthy cells, tissue, glands, organ that aid in metabolism, hormone, mental, physical or chemical activities of human body. So the acid alkaline balance play an important role in the balanced body chemistry, which is in our diet should consist 80% of alkaline and 20% of acid forming food, which can provide enough nutrient, namely carbohydrate, dietary fibers and protein. So a high protein diet is helped to check the blood pressure, as it is digested slowly compared to the carbohydrate, causing less insulin and leptin production in the body. So as we all know that blood pressure throughout the range in developed countries is the most important risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Food rich in a protein that we are used by every part of our body for growth and development, because it plays an important role in the cell and fluids, and it is also help in better metabolism, bone health, strong immune system, and the overall health. Okay, moreover, heart healthy protein should be included in our diet, because it's help in lower our cholesterol and blood pressure, that is beneficial for the overall health of our bodies. And lastly it is important that we have to get adequate protein through our diet to improve our quality of life.
We move to the next part, which is methodology. First is data description. For this study, data description used is secondary data. Secondary data is a type of data that is already available, and this data was collected from internet. Population for this study consists of all vegetarian at some place, and for sample, it consists of 9 vegetarian randomly selected. Next is sampling technique. Sampling techniques is the sampling process that can be done by selecting a sample that can be represent the population as accurately as possible. The data was collected from the internet using cluster sampling. The researcher will look through some previous examination question on the internet and divide it into group called cluster, and then select a number of clusters randomly from them. Generally, it is to further refine the model or the decision in some way, and this method was very easy to carry out. For data collection method, the data was collected directly from internet as it is easy to access and require less time to collect. In this study, we used the data from February 2022 STA108 previous examination. Last but not least, the description of the variable. This study was carried out to find whether the number of grams of protein each ate per day was related to systolic blood pressure. The variable of this study were the number of protein each ate per day and blood pressure. Both of the variables were quantitative continuous. The data can be expressed as a number and numerical response which come from a counting process. Blood pressure is collected based on the data, and its level measurement for both variables were ratio scale, in which differences between two values and ratio of two values are meaningful, and there exists a true zero.
Next is graphical technique. In this study, we use histogram as it's used to describe numerical data that have been grouped into the simple and relative frequency distribution. The first histogram displays the distribution of frequency and number of protein, and the second histogram displays the distribution of frequency and blood pressure.
Last but not least is numerical technique. First is measure of central tendency. It is a single value situated at the center of a data and can be taken as summary value for that data set. It is usually called the measure of average. 3 types of average that are often used are measure of central tendency, mean, median, and mode. The mean, also known as the arithmetic average, is found by adding the value of the data and dividing by the total number of value. The median is the halfway point in a data set. To determine the median, one has to arrange the data in ascending order and then select the central value of the data as the median. The median either will be a specific value in the data set or will fall between two values. And lastly, the mode. The mode is the value that occur most often in the data set. A data set can have more than one mode or no mode at all, and that was the formula for mean, median, and mode. Second is correlation and regression. Correlation analysis is a statistical method used to measure the strength of the relationship between two variables. There are several techniques that have been introduced such as Spearman's coefficient of rent correlation method and Pearson product moment correlation coefficient. In this study, we use Pearson's product moment correlation coefficient. Linear correlation coefficient provide us with the measure to evaluate the strength of a relationship. Pearson product moment correlation coefficient is normally denoted by X. This method was carried out when dealing with a dataset containing quantitative variable.
Lastly is simple linear regression. A simple linear relationship involving only two variables. One would be the dependent variable, which is y, while the other would be the independent variable, which is x. The dependent variable is the variable in regression that cannot be controlled or manipulated. In this study, the dependent variable is blood pressure and the independent variable is number of protein. The linear regression equation can be represented by y equals to a plus bx, and the regression equation can be calculated using the following formula. This is a numerical data about the number of proteins and blood pressure of a vegetarian person. The value of both variable was entered to the IBM SPSS to know the measure of tendency, measure of dispersion, and the correlation and regression of the data. From this descriptive statistic data that we got from IBM SPSS, we can know the mean, the median, the mode, the variance, the standard deviation, the percent coefficient of skewness, and also the range for number of protein in gram and blood pressure in milliliters mercury.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, I will explain about the correlation and regression data analysis. In this slide, we have a scatter diagram. In this scatter diagram, we have x-axis as the number of protein taken per day by the vegetarians, and the y-axis is for diastolic blood pressure. So for the scatter diagram, we can conclude that the proof of variable has a positive correlation each other. Next, in this slide, we have two tables. That is the proof of table from the output IBM SPSS. So first table is about the R value. R value is a percent correlation. So in this data, we have a positive R value that is 0.916. This value show that there are a strong positive linear correlation exists between the number of protein value and the diastolic blood pressure value. Okay, for the second table is about the variable enter and remove from the data. Okay, the variable enter in this data is a independent value, that is a number of protein taken by a vegetarian person. Okay, by that we can see that the diastolic blood pressure in this data depend on the number of protein taken by each vegetarian person per day. In this data, we can see the output of IBM SPSS show the value of R square. So by R square value, we can determine the coefficient of determination. The R square value for this data is 0.839. This means that 83.9% variation of blood pressure is affected by the number of protein taken by each vegetarian in a day, and the 16.1% left variation of blood pressure is affected by other variable. From the IBM SPSS, also we can get the slope and y-intercept value. So from this data, the y-intercept value, or known as A, is 64.936, and the slope value, or known as B, is 2.662. Okay, the y-intercept means that when x is equal to 0, so the fixed blood pressure value is 64.936, and the slope means that when there have an increase 1 unit in number of protein, the blood pressure also will increase 2.662 units. Okay, in this slide also we have a linear regression equation, that is y equal to a plus bx. So in this data, the linear regression equation will be blood pressure equal to 64.936 plus 2.662 number of protein in gram. Last but not least, for the conclusion in this case study, we can find that first, the diastolic blood pressure for each vegetarian person not same each other. It may be because of the number of protein taken by the person is different each other based on the size and capacity needed by the body. Okay, second, we can conclude that the protein has many benefits for human health and growth. Third is we can conclude that the most suitable graph for this case study and this data is histogram. And last is we can find that the values of measure of tendency, measure of dispersion, correlation, and simple linear regression was successfully determined. I think that's all from us. Thank you.